I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. McKee here. Lanterman. Here. Friedrich.
Present.
Varenkamp.
Here.
Nichols. Here. All right. If you'd like to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda approval. Staff looks like we had maybe one addition from at least the version I had.
So the last one, there was actually 3 additions,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. One was new business A, one was new business B, and then 13A was updated.
Okay, anything from council? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, no presentations, on to open forum.
Doesn't look like there's anyone.
Doesn't look like there's anyone there, okay. We'll move on to consent. We have a consent agenda consisting of items 6A through 6T. Does anyone want to pull anything?
Can I pull 6O?
6O?
Yep.
Show. Anything else? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 6A through N and P through T.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. 6O, Michelle.
Yeah, so I guess I would like some clarification on, so I know we approved within the police department's contract that we were gonna start utilizing take-home vehicles, and that's what we're doing. We're purchasing the 4 take-home vehicles kind of to offset with the other vehicles that we weren't going to get and offsetting with some of the insurance claims that we had. Weren't we gonna phase in the vehicles? I thought we were gonna sort of like, and not just do it all at once.
So we are phasing it. This wouldn't be
Okay.
the full, this wouldn't be all of it.
Okay.
This is reallocating the funds that we had allocated to vehicles already. So it's the same amount of dollars that we were planning to use on fleet replacements this year in our CIP.
Okay.
We had strokes, call it good luck or bad luck. We had some cars that were replaced by insurance that has changed we haven't needed to replace those. We delayed on the fire deputy director position. So even prior to that plan, this is what we're planning on spending on vehicles. We don't need to replace those vehicles, so this would be,
Sure.
the proposal is to use that funding to get us closer to getting there, but we'll still have to be a multi-year phase to get there.
Which I understand. I guess what I would say is I feel like we could save some money by not doing the fire positions car, which was that 110,000?
So that is, yeah, we would
Okay.
not be purchasing that. That would be changing that to a squad car.
Right. But since we aren't going to be utilizing that piece, that would be one area that we could actually save some money in. Still do the purchase of the other cars with the other things. I wanted to ask that question because I saw it as a potential area we could save some money.
We actually have to spend the bonding dollars. And so
Okay.
this is a clarification of how we are distributing them. And candidly, when I talked with bond counsel, we talked about this a lot with staff. This isn't a requirement that we had to do, like we could go forward because technically and legally we've been authorized to do this. This is in the spirit of transparency, so council is aware of where those allocated dollars are going, and so that the public is aware too, because it's changing a little bit, but in the spirit of transparency, we're actually trying to go above and beyond to ensure that everybody understands how they're being spent. But
Sure.
we have an obligation in order to expend those dollars that were part of the 20.
I guess I was thinking since we cut certain pieces out of the budget last year, that this was a piece that would have been cut, so it wouldn't have been included in the budget. So I guess that's where I was confused.
So it was in the CIP when we went forward for the 2025 CIP. There's
Okay.
So the 2025 CIP bonding happened before the 2026
Gotcha.
budget process.
Okay. Thank you.
From?
I'll make a motion to approve a consent agenda 6O.
Sounds good. Do we have a second?
Second.
You get to pick that? And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Done with that. Moving right along. Nothing for 7. Planning. Economic Development Strategy City Council Workshop session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mary is here to present.
And I'm here with my colleague, Jim Brock. He's going to present one of the slides. So what I'm going to do tonight, Mayor and Council, it's my pleasure to be here with you this evening. So we're going to go through some general ideas and kind of preliminary findings, and I'd like to get as much as possible. I'd like to get your comments. I'd like to get your input on these items, just even if generally, and to highlight some things. Actually, it's interesting that we were here a little early because a lot of the information that was presented by the Public Works Department kind of highlights some of the things that are in the presentation and some considerations and items that we've been seeing as we're starting to do our work here. So thanks. Next slide. So highlight kind of key findings today, a little bit on growth, valuation, budget, fiscal impact assessment, some preliminary thoughts, and also I've included an example of one way to calculate certain types of growth, but we'll also be providing a little later on, be providing multiple examples of how to calculate that for different types of uses. Competitive position, a little bit about strengths, weaknesses, and challenges. Key development nodes, and we'll be briefly going through each of the key development nodes that we've been provided with by the city, and a little bit of thoughts about strategic actions. Preparing for the next wave. So I guess the next wave, as we're seeing it, is, and this is over the next 25 years, but 2050 land use and planning, which is coming up, and a potential MUSA extension, and then some input and discussion. And I would also say, I would welcome if there's some specific question or clarification as we go along, I'd be happy to take that. So next slide. So looking just generally at economic development, so certain Midwest community strategies are starting to come to the fore in a lot of other communities in the Midwest when they're looking at economic development, and some things that they're looking at in forward thinking. So I wanted to present some of these. So consumers are currently prioritizing experiences, and we're seeing this kind of all over, even here in the Twin Cities. Community, environment, and livability. So I think significant residential development here in Corcoran demonstrates this. Businesses are taking a broader view when evaluating where to invest and grow, paying attention to housing availability, quality of life, and amenities. I think Corcoran can definitely promote this moving forward for their community. Managing growth thoughtfully must be a priority. Infrastructure, transportation, commercial and industrial development must continue to evolve alongside residential development while preserving the quality of life that residents value. So how to work collaboratively in the community, not only with developers, but also with residents and businesses to achieve mutual goals. Public-private partnerships, so tools in the toolbox. And this will come a little bit later, so not necessarily in this presentation, but I wanted to say that we are going to be looking into this for the economic development strategy. So what resources are available to Corcoran and third-party and other types of resources to assist in attracting specific types of development, county, region, and state. So next slide. So you heard a lot about growth, and I guess this is a slide that just highlights it. So from 2010 to 2020, there was a significant amount of growth, but 2020 to 2030 already, we're only kind of halfway through, and for the decade, this is what's being projected. So when people are kind of always talking about growth in Corcoran, this kind of highlights it. This is where you're moving. I mean, obviously, kind of 2030 to 2040, we expect it to kind of ratchet down a little bit. And 2040 to 2050 still kind of be, but still up there in those double digits. And that's just, so that is really what's driving a lot of what we're looking at here and what a lot of people are talking about.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Where do those farther out projections come from? What is that data based on?
So really, it's based on information that's already been provided by the city and then through the Metropolitan Council. So we've looked at what has already occurred in terms of building permit data and developments that are coming forward. And then the further out growth projections were really city projections given to the Metropolitan Council that were a collaborative effort. So those can change. I will tell you that in different communities that we're working in right now, we've seen sometimes what has happened is if growth has started to grow more rapidly, then if we're doing an analysis kind of mid-decade, we're sometimes seeing communities that have exceeded those projections already. They may have exceeded their 2030 projections early. So how can Corcoran effectively provide for this growth through infrastructure, services, and amenities that residents will need and want? And that's kind of just, at this point, a rhetorical question.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Since we were talking about population growth, what was our estimated population in our last comp plan for 2030 for Corcoran? Do we know that number?
I don't know it off the top of
Okay.
my head, but we can certainly
Okay.
find it out. Okay. So the median home price from the MLS as of 2026, $634,000. This is very high. I think it speaks to a number of different things in Corcoran, but obviously home values here are very, very high. Land acres estimates, so residential, somewhere between 50 and 100,000 per acre, non-residential, somewhere around 200,000. Those are very rough estimates. We'll be drilling down a little more on those, looking at a separation between commercial and industrial, and also agricultural land. Next slide. So estimated market values by land use. So this looks at the percentages of each category of land use as of 2025. This information came from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. And so residential homestead, 65% of the entire market value for Corcoran is residential homestead. And non-homestead is 15%, residential apartment 1.1, commercial 1.43, industrial 3.1, agricultural residential 2.46, and agricultural residential non-homestead, that's actually land, and that is 6.9%.
Excuse me, is
Yeah.
this, I don't see the screen in our presentation.
No,
Is it-
and I
oh,
apologize for that.
okay.
I should have said that in the beginning. I did add some slides
Okay,
to that.
okay. Could we get a copy after the meeting just so we can refer back? I'm sorry, I just can't see
I
right
got
now.
it just before we went live.
No problem, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I apologize. Sorry about that. Next slide. Comparison of estimated market values by land use, 2025. So this, interestingly enough, when they started talking about, at Public Works, about communities that they chose for comparison, so some of these I actually picked out two for comparison. A lot of them are very near here or adjacent to Corcoran. So a lot of these communities actually have fairly similar percentages of residential homestead values. Residential non-homestead tends to be similar among Corcoran, Medina, and Dayton. Ag is, of course, highest for Corcoran due to the MUSA boundary. Commercial percentages are relatively low for Corcoran and Dayton, and industrial tends to be relatively low for both Medina and Corcoran. Next slide. So budget considerations, I'm going to have Jim come up here and just kind of talk through this slide.
Thanks, Mary. So just by broad background, community affordability, that is your taxes, are really an important consideration now and in the future. So what you're doing now in terms of being very intentional about land use is important, and we'll talk more about why that is. But one of the basic reasons, especially why it's especially important for communities that are growing real fast with residential development, is that what we've seen when we look at this in this region, but other regions as well, is that communities that are growing fast from a residential perspective will certainly face financial challenges over the long run, and that's because the infrastructure and the housing that you have in place right now is new, and you'll continue to add that infrastructure, and a lot of the costs related to maintaining that infrastructure will not be realized until the future. And so that operating cost is going to increase. So what you want to do is you want to take a look at long-term financial stability. And in order to do this, you also want to look at how can we be intentional about attracting development that helps us have a better balance of tax base for a lot of different reasons. Number one, just tax yields. So commercial and industrial yields on average about 85% more than you will see per value than residential development. So you want to be intentional about that, and it's easy, especially in a fast-growing community with a residential focus. It's easy to get pressure to fill in some of that development that has been designated for commercial and industrial with residential, but doing so can really endanger long-term community affordability. So that's the big picture here. Diversifying tax base is also important because as you mature as a community, as Mary pointed out, people are going to be looking for more proximity to jobs, to services, to education, to services, and to shopping. And they're going to want it closer because travel times are going to change too. So you're going to want to make sure that you have that in the future. Again, there's going to be pressure, residential pressure, and we see that already. There's maybe not as much pressure, maybe even resistance to commercial and industrial type development, but succumbing to that is going to create bigger problems over the long term. So we also want to make sure there's a balance because it mitigates risk to changes in tax policy and market impacts. Because this would never happen in Minnesota, but you could, and I say that somewhat facetiously, but you can see that there would be pressure at times to change and reduce maybe taxes impact for residential purposes. And that's going to diminish even more the tax base that you have to support the services and infrastructure needs for your community. In investors and developers, they're going to look for communities, especially from a commercial and industrial standpoint. They're going to be looking for, on one hand, what you have is you have a population in place right now that can, and in the future, will support their investments, their market placement for industry, for commercial, for shopping. It may not all be in place exactly where they want it now, but anticipating that and making sure that you have a good plan for your community and you stick to it will help in the long run. Infrastructure, including streets, water, sewer, all of that, and that's why it was fortuitous to hear this explanation and for you to hear it as well. There's big challenges going forward in terms of maintaining that infrastructure and having the resources to do that, both from a user taxpayer standpoint, but also from overall from a tax standpoint is very important as well. So in summary, what you're doing is critical to the long-term financial stability of your community. But it's going to be important that you have a plan that works for your community, that makes sense, but also that is responsive to what the market says is appropriate for your community.
So fiscal impact analysis preliminary findings. Residential development definitely, I think everybody knows this, pays a lower tax rate, especially for single family, but service usage is higher than for non-residential development. Commercial and industrial development produces almost double the tax revenue of residential, but requires and has less service usage. So different types of calculations. So there are a lot of different types of calculations you can use for fiscal impact analysis. So in this presentation, we've really provided just one example right now, but we're going to be providing a number of different examples of different types of ways to calculate this, both more simplistic for different types of uses and then more complicated or more intensive as you get towards really looking at various specific types of development proposals coming in. So the per capita multiplier, that's one of the more simplistic ones, and that's really for residential only. So fiscal impact analysis can become part of the annual budgeting process, and it can also guide land use planning and economic development strategies. Next slide. So this is one example of how to use a proportional cost from new development. The assumptions are that municipal costs increase with the intensity of land use, accounts for a change in real property values, it aggregates impacts of commercial and industrial land uses on municipal services are similar enough to be grouped together. So this type of an example really is not intended to be utilized where you have a commercial or industrial development that may create a much more significant and intensive use within your community. So that has to be a different type of calculation. But just generally, so it's basically you're taking the total municipal expenditures and using the proportion of that that's currently the estimated market value, and then calculating the increase, proportional increase, and then allocating it back to the total. And then a cost allocated to a new facility is based on what that facility costs and what they would require from the total municipal budget. Next slide. So competitive position in the Northwest Metro. So there is a significant amount of land available for development within all of Corcoran, but a large amount of that is agricultural land that is not currently within the MUSA. It has a very high quality of life. There is a need for redevelopment, focused development at key development nodes, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So you're really adding a lot of rooftops right now, but new retail development is currently focused on adjacent cities. So also, we're going to be looking at how to increase awareness of that as we move through this process. So increase awareness about what is here in Corcoran, how developers or people who are looking at commercial opportunities here can take advantage of that. Next slide. So the key development nodes, so we'll go through them, but briefly. So there are some strategic actions, review and analyze options for redevelopment, rezoning, and or re-guiding of some properties. I don't think we really, given the trajectory that Corcoran is on and the need to increase the amount of commercial and industrial development here, we don't want to really consider, I think, a lot of significant re-guiding of some properties unless we really think that the current guide plan for that is really, in some manner, really not justified based on either future land use or surrounding compatibility or something of that nature. I think it's easy to think that, oh, we aren't going to get something. And there is some of that, I think, when we go through market cycles. So market cycles, of course, go up and down, and we've all seen them. But I think sometimes, I remember working out in Chanhassen, and they wanted to re-guide a bunch of industrial land to residential. And it was because of a downturn in the industrial market. And of course, then shortly after that, industrial came roaring back. I mean, so it's easy to want to make short-term changes, potentially at the expense of long-term goals. So I think those need to be, Corcoran needs to consider those, I guess, carefully. What are the best options for redevelopment and development, and how to accomplish those? What uses can be attracted to particular nodes that do not need direct major arterial access? I think this is really important in Corcoran, of course, because of where it's geographically positioned and how the roads are currently, where the interstate is, and how some of those major roadways are currently in place. Would those uses be complementary with existing uses or in conflict? And we'll definitely be looking at that. So what land parcels are currently ripe for development and how to promote those? Next slide. So identified, so there were 6 identified development nodes. We're happy to take more, I guess, but the city was kind enough to provide us with what they view as the key development nodes here in the city. And next slide. So the historic district, some of these names are what I made up. So if you have a different name that you would like to refer to, I'm certainly open to that. But I called it the historic district. So this is an area where we have a significant mix of uses. We have institutional, we have recreational, we have commercial, we have industrial. We have, and then of course right next to it, we'll talk a little bit about that later, is we have kind of a newer mixed use area. Or an area that is targeted for mixed-use development. And there are some redevelopment challenges and issues that are associated, I think, with both the commercial node here as well as the industrial node. And as we go through this process, we'll be looking at that carefully, and we'll be considering how, and also there's some planned roadway changes here. So we'll be looking at that and how we might recommend what might be considered in terms of economic development and a strategic focus for this area moving forward. Next slide. So this is currently what I call the gateway node. And we know that there's, of course, industrial development occurring up in this area. And then we also have, of course, some other uses here. I think certainly that industrial area that's developing right now, I think this is very important for the city. It maybe doesn't necessarily have I would say maybe this full out access point, but I would say because of where it's located and the fact that it's clearly close to some major thoroughfares, this area is ripe for this type of industrial development.
Just to clarify, is that the pink area, the industrial area?
No.
It's that purple, long purple area.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But the purple is already fully
It's under.
assigned,
It's
right?
under,
Yes.
partially built out and partially
I
being
will
built.
correct, so I think our map here needs to get updated, and me and Dwight were talking about an issue running into with updating this online map. That south, actually on the northwest corner is where Bread Barn is essentially.
Yep.
That got changed to commercial. There is more commercial room there for growth. I don't know what his plans are in the long term because it's all owned by Mr. Benjamin
Yep.
right now. But the rest of the purple is underway.
Yep. Which is great. So next slide. So this is at rural commercial industrial node, and this is along County Road 19 and then County Road 10 and 30. So this, again, this area here, I think we have, this is going to be, I think, one of the more interesting notes to really evaluate and look at what we can attract here moving forward. It potentially won't, well, once new roadway changes go through, I think that will improve this area in terms of commercial and industrial development, but I think this is a little more kind of along the growth trajectory versus some of the other nodes that we're looking at. Next slide. So here's a future node that has already had some interest in terms of development. And so we see this, even though it's a future node, I think this area here is obviously a more short-term development. So within the next, I would say, 10 years, looking at a lot of different types of uses. I think here it's really going to be how do we manage the different types of uses coming in and what will come in sooner rather than later. Next slide. And here's the downtown mixed use. In this area, I think that there definitely has been a lot of work done on this area in terms of planning. And I think here it's really a situation of how do we encourage and support development to come into this area in keeping with the plan. You know, there may have to be some modest adjustments, I think, in terms of mixed use. Because I know that this was originally developed as a very, very intense area for development. And some of the market conditions have shifted. But still, I see this definitely as an area that would be a lot more intense in terms of development over time than a lot of the other areas. Next slide. And this is kind of our last key development node. So it's the southwest corner of the city. Again, opportunities here for community commercial and some industrial development in a little bit more, not quite as intense, but still, again, adding on to this area with those types of uses that are suited for this location in terms of building that tax base. Next slide. So preparing for the next wave, 2050 land use. So the current focus will be on land within the MUSA and strategic use of current resources. So what additional costs need to be considered and additional resources needed as land is added to the MUSA? Thoughtful development and expansion of resources to diversify and grow responsibly, a greater focus on non-residential development and how to attract in the short term. And then, so actually here, well, actually, next slide. Oh, sorry. So here I would just what I would like to do right at this moment is just get some input and feedback from you, especially on kind of your comments on the different development nodes and your thoughts about those and what challenges you feel you're seeing and what your kind of desires are in terms of how to address kind of future economic development for the city.
Mary, before they answer that,
Yeah.
we actually got some data, and Natalie pulled it up, so I just wanted to answer.
Oh, yeah,
because
absolutely.
it might influence your responses that Councilmember Friedrich had asked. So in the 2030 comp plan, at that point, by 2030, Corcoran is expected to be 17,600. Then in the 2040 comp plan, as Met Council really ratcheted down, 2030 was expected to be 8,900, and 2040 was expected to be 11,300. And then now the projections that we've received to date for the 2050 comp plan, 2030 is now expected to be 11,700, 2040 is expected to be 15,000, and 2050 is expected to be 19,600.
So did we receive those, or did we generate those, or was it a collaborative effort?
Oh, okay. The 2030, 2040 comp plan, that is what Met Council issued as part of our system statement in our forecast. The 2050, I pushed back because the initial forecast they gave were way too low. We already exceeded them. So I pushed back significantly. So I would say the 2050 forecasts are in combination. It wasn't quite what I was projecting, so it was a little bit of a midway point between their data and our data.
Okay. So it's low from what staff is seeing happening, but it was good effort on Natalie's part in order to get them to move. When we initially started the conversations about 2050, the projections that they had for 2030, we were already past those projections when they came out with those initial 2050 numbers.
And I would argue 11,700 we're going to hit in the next year or so.
Yeah.
So I think they're still a little low, but I counted it a win because I got them to move the needle, which was apparently we tried that for 2042 and we were not as successful.
How does it hurt us if they underestimate?
So it hurts us because it affects our planning and our decisions if we're going off those numbers. And then my concern was the capacity issue with infrastructure planning. That was my biggest concern. So I'm feeling much better about the numbers that we have right now because it does allow for some dips in growth, which I have a feeling the economy is going to be very hard to predict over the next couple of years. So I think it's a good midway point. I think so far we have kind of surpassed economic projections in terms of other cities were slowing down, we were speeding up the building permits, but I do think it's good to have a bit of a conservative estimate as well. So.
And trying to push them on those numbers, so Matt Selmeyer, our finance director, used to be the budget planner for Met Council, and he would talk as they're getting ready to invest in capital asset long-term planning. That's being driven by some of these projections. And so how that impacts us, as we have sat in recent conversations, what we were seeing planned for the the southwest corridor in terms of how that sewer access was going to be planned towards the future, we were able to, by recognizing some of this push on them, because they're making some decisions about what's going to happen to that capital investment, and particularly the rural area and what's going to happen for the future with that if the MUSA continues to move west. These projections are very critical to them in terms of the considerations for future asset planning. And if they are lowballing it, that puts Corcoran in a very difficult position in the future.
And those numbers are also used for a lot of different funding sources and grants and stuff based on population numbers that they have. So whether or not it's accurate.
Very good. Thank you.
I think the other thing too, and I'm really happy that you push back on them, because I think, well, in our work too, we see a lot of times that there has been so much growth in a lot of different communities, and to be able to promote where you're going and how much growth you've had is important too, and for attracting new development.
I think she asked us a question.
Yeah, any
Comments.
responses, comments?
I'm happy to have any comments.
I'm willing to go first when somebody else really wants to.
Go for it.
Thank you, this is great information. I've said for a long time that I feel like the existing comp plan land use allocations are a little bit random looking. So on this graphic, there's so many areas where you have, especially you can see it in downtown, you can see it in Northeast. There's a lot of very different land uses very close to one another.
Okay.
And there's a lot of high intensity uses right next to very low intensity uses. And what I hear you say, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, when you look at comparable cities, we have under-allocated land for industrial and commercial. As we go into 2050, it seems like it would make sense to look for opportunities to maybe resolve some of those high-density, low-density interfaces where they haven't developed yet, with a bias toward creating more high-intensity, industrial-type, mixed-use type zones, while minimizing and giving a good density gradient down from those to the lower intensity uses. I think I also heard you say, be very careful about re-guiding anything that is currently industrial because it's already low. Don't allow those to go into residential because we already have a lot of that and it can be very expensive long term. I'm a little curious about what becomes feasible. You know, our two primary highway access areas are northeast. You know, we've had some success with industrial there. We have some industrial that's been applied for and I think extended down here by 55, but not actually had enough interest to go forward building. What do we know about future plans here in Southwest? Is that another potential industrial commercial locus? Or is that probably something we want to look at the next comp plan?
So that's been an ongoing conversation with the Met Council as well, is trying to figure out how to serve the area. I think that's the biggest limitation is what we're facing right now is right now septic and well. It was under a study area. It was supposed to be done by the 2015 comp plan. It wasn't. So we had
It's going crazy.
planning and engineering have been speaking with my council to try to get some actual timeline to that. Jay was at the meeting as well. I think we did put pressure on them that that needs to be identified how that's going to be served. And I think one of their initial thoughts of how it would be served would have just been undoable with how our current infrastructure is lined up, and would have potentially put it out several decades. So we're pushing for a different routing that would allow for that to be more feasible, hopefully by the end of the 2050 window.
Okay.
So I do think long term that is the correct area for industrial. It's just going to have to really wait and then try to encourage those uses that can go with septic and well for now. But I do think it's zoned and guided correctly off of 55. It's just we have to now figure out how to service it so that we actually get those users in.
And if I can just add to that, that's a really important opportunity. The Met Council can control a lot of the infrastructure that's needed for that type of stuff. Connecting the importance of developing those the available sites, being in a position to provide the infrastructure to do that, also ties into their concern about transportation. I mean, you're going to be able to potentially reduce some of that commuter transportation if you provide more uses of that commercial and industrial within the existing framework, and that could push them to provide the infrastructure, which is really important. I mean, that's what they want to do, then they can provide the infrastructure.
I certainly think there's value for us as a city in having the higher intensity uses at the periphery rather than the core, so that the core can retain more of that rural character, less traffic, smaller roads, because all of the service is happening at the outer edges. Versus if your core is where your really intense portion is, and everybody is coming into the core, and roads have to be very networked all the way through the whole city without having any open, quiet spaces.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments?
Can we provide comments later? I wasn't
Oh,
prepared
yes.
to give comments. I thought this was just informational only tonight.
No,
I'm
no, no,
sorry.
that's fine. I'm open to receiving comments at any time.
And if I can add to that, there's going to be other public engagements on this, and to the extent possible, your participation at those by encouraging people that you know that are interested in this, and even people that don't, encouraging them to attend, and you attending with them is very, very helpful, because that'll allow you to listen to what they have to say. You don't have to sell them. In fact, it's better if you don't try to encourage them to think one way or another about it, and just listen to what they have to say, because that'll broaden that input that you will benefit from as you make your decisions regarding land use home. So encouraging others to attend and attending yourself and listening to what people have to say firsthand would be very, very helpful.
So we have a community engagement session this coming Tuesday, May 19th. We also have a session with the Planning Commission on June 4th. And then we have a second community engagement session on June 9th. Yeah, June 9th.
And then it might be helpful just to also add that the 19th is geared more towards business owners, and overall, for diversity of thought. And then the 9th is more geared towards anyone. So,
Yep.
What time is that on the 19th and the 9th?
6 to 7:30 here at City Hall.
On both
When is the
days?
4th?
I'm sorry.
Which one is the 4th? What time?
So, oh, I'm sorry, the June 4th is the
Planning Commission.
Okay.
And so that's at 7 o'clock on Thursday, June 4th. And I'm sorry, it's both engagements for the open houses are from 6 to 7:30.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. Any other comments?
I think we're good for now.
Okay,
I'm sure
good,
we'll
but-
be reaching out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Excuse me. On to new business. 9A, which is open meeting law discussion. Is that Jay, John?
I'll kick it off, Mayor, and then I'll hand it over to John. Some discussions that we've had regarding the open meeting law, just wanted to have a discussion so that staff gets clarification and guidance, but then also to share some things. I'm in a Compass group with other city administrators, and I'm constantly talking about how they are navigating the emerging challenges of just doing city work. And one of the conversations that came up that I thought was really important for us to clarify, and then some conversations that I've had with some of you, is tangential to open meeting laws, and that goes with the interpretation of open meeting law regarding what they call serial meetings. And so I wanted to make sure that came up in my last job with my last council. It became a hot button. And then as I was talking with staff about it, I learned that it actually was a hot button with Greenfield, I think about 10 years ago, is what I was told. And so I talked with John about it, and then just asked to discuss for my understanding, but then also to make sure that we are communicating clearly what is that? Is that a concern? Why is that a concern regarding the open meeting law? And to have a discussion about that so that we just avoid the potential perception of crossing lines there. Because as we are stewards of the public trust, desiring to be as transparent as possible, ensuring that our practices align with that desire. So, John, anything else you wanted to say about that?
I don't have anything prepared, Mayor and Council. So in response to that conversation, the memo in your packet was really there just to cover some kind of high-level identification of a serial meeting and potential practices to avoid them. But I can be a resource if you want to have a discussion or you have specific questions related to how this plays out.
So to kick it off, the example that I gave as we were talking about it is a serial meeting could be, correct me if I'm right on this, so we have an upcoming topic for an agenda that would be discussing days of the week. And a council member talked with one council member about Mondays, another council member about Tuesdays, another council member about Wednesdays, and then another council member about Thursdays. And so while in and of itself it might not seem like that's a concern, the fact that it is collectively impacting the overall discussion about days of the week, even though it was 4 separate conversations, that would, under case law, potentially be concerning. And so what might be helpful too is if that does come up, he was here earlier. When this came up when I first got here, I remember Councilmember Bodema, then Councilmember Bodema, stating to me that when conversations would come up, if another council member called him and said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about Mondays, Councilmember Bodema would say, have you talked to anyone else about Mondays or days of the week? And they would say no. And he'd say, well, I already had a conversation with Jay, Councilmember Jay, about days of the week, so I can't talk to you about days of the week.
Yep.
Okay.
Well stated. I think the serial meeting problem, it can come up somewhat casually just because, just regular communication, it's not necessarily intended that a topic is bridged into. But, the best way to avoid the problem, I can tell you anecdotally, there are some attorneys that will guide, well, this would be a reason to just avoid talking about anything city business outside of me, and that can be an approach you take. But I don't think that's never been the practice in Corcoran. I don't think that has to start now. It just means having that sort of disciplined interaction at the top of communications. Have you talked to anyone else about this? And then that way both parties involved know, well, actually I talked to a different council member, I better steer away from that one, but we'll wait and we'll talk about that at the open meeting, versus, nope, free to go, and you have your discussion, and then following that, you're gonna make that disclosure to anybody else that follows up directly with you. So as an approach, you as a council can agree on how you would do that. You can have your own individual styles, but the main thing you wanna be cognizant of is not communicating serially with a number of councilors, which might involve less than a quorum each time you do it. 2 people involved, but I speak with 2 different people on separate occasions about substantially similar topics. What that amounts to is 1 or more council members having information about where all of their counterparts sit on the council, or a quorum of the council sits on an issue. And the theory behind that is it deprives the public's right to view that conversation, to have to monitor it themselves. So I don't believe that we have any attempt to to circumvent it here, but this is really more of an idea of understanding it and avoiding situations where unintentionally we may be having conversations that can be problematic simply because we didn't have that front end conversation of have you talked with anyone else. I have, like you mentioned, from Councilman Bottom when we do. I think that's a good practice, and that's one way that you can steer clear of it.
And it's always easy to, if you have some information that you want to get out to council, and it's not at a meeting, go through Jay, and you can get it out as appropriate.
Or could we do a council memo like you had issued to us?
You could, but I'd bring it to the meeting.
Yeah.
John, I think you did a nice job on the memo. I just want to start by saying that I support Minnesota's open meeting law and the principle behind it. Public business should be conducted publicly, and transparency matters. But with that said, after reviewing this memo, I do have concerns about how broadly this issue is being framed. My understanding is that Minnesota law generally allows 2 members of a 5-member council to discuss city business privately, provided they're not attempting to evade public discussion or secretly deliberate as a quorum. What concerns me is that the memo repeatedly uses phrases like may be interpreted, factually specific, and substantially similar topic. Now, that tells me that it's not a bright line rule here. And under an overly broad interpretation, my concern is that ordinary governance conversations could suddenly become suspect simply because policy issues naturally overlap. Things like compensation, budgeting, staffing, and personnel matters. And I think that intent matters. The cases that were cited in the memo the cases cited appear primarily concerned with intentional efforts to pull a quorum, predetermine outcomes, or avoid public discussion. The memo essentially suggests that council members need to track who has already discussed a topic before speaking with another member. I'm not sure that that's realistic in day-to-day governance. I guess my question would be is, what if I receive a call from Michelle asking me about squad cars, And then Dean calls me asking me about longevity, and then I get another call from Jeremy about compensation packages. Well, in my mind, maybe they're not related. Maybe, I don't know if it's Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, but maybe they are related. And finally, I think that consistency matters. Staff routinely communicates individually with council members about agenda items, budgeting, development projects, compensation, and other city business, sometimes even discussing concerns, priorities, or preferences. So I think it's fair to ask, how is it that staff can individually communicate with multiple council members regarding city business, but council members themselves are expected to avoid similar conversations with one another? Now, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that staff is violating any open meeting laws or doing anything inappropriate. I'm just saying that as an example. But I'm simply saying that if we're going to broadly interpret sequential communications, then we should apply that discussion consistently across the entire governance process. And finally, I just think we should be careful not to overstate restrictions in a way that discourages ordinary professional communication between elected officials. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So I'm just thinking back to our discussion that we've had from previous meetings when we were going to set up the advisory board. And we were going to have 2 council members on the advisory board. If one of the council members would have spoke to a third council member, that could have constituted a transparency issue, an open meeting law issue, right? Because that would have been 3 council members having a discussion. Is that kind of what we're talking about here? Okay.
It could be. If I'm mayor and council, that actually could be a reason to consider using that model. Because when you do, you're identifying 2 parties that are going to talk about a given issue, so the others know to kind of stay away until the open meeting. Versus if it's just a casual conversation or you're talking business outside of the open meeting, you have to be a little more careful because you don't know what other conversations are taking place. And you don't know if there's, if 2 people are definitely in a room talking about that topic's off limits, right? So that you can look at it either way, but I would say that might be something to put on the side of the scale of, well, doing that defines that role a little more, for everyone. So.
Right. Or as we decided, we just will have an open meeting about it too. That way we're all involved, depending on who, and I guess what the circumstance is, who wants to be involved.
Right.
I was gonna say one more thing, and now it slipped my mind. I remember. Speaking of the council memos, I feel like that's a useful tool too, to relay information that maybe isn't being relayed to everybody the same way. I don't know if that's something that we could utilize more, and if that needs to be included in a council packet if we are sharing or receiving information about a specific topic that we're going to be discussing. So for example, Jay meets with each one of us individually. Maybe a great piece to that would be a council memo, so we're all getting the same information, receiving it the same, versus maybe one person asking additional questions and then someone else not getting that same information. Because then when we come to the meeting, we might all have different information. Maybe that's okay because it comes out in the discussion, but would council memos be a useful tool for that?
We've actually, I hope you've noticed, regarding the personnel discussions, we've actually moved towards that model. So Alicia's been communicating with everybody because I do think that it's valuable. Not always valuable, like sometimes, Jay, how many people wear blue shoes? Not everybody might be interested in that. So there has to be a certain level of discretion, but because otherwise the discussions that I have with the 5 of you trying to encapsulate all of those discussions, there's also some personal discussions. What do I include in the memo? So there has to be some level of discretion, but definitely moving in that direction. I also wanted to own something, and this is my responsibility. Us even coming forward, asking for the personnel committee, you actually approved for 2026 and the appointments, the Personnel Committee appointment of Mayor McKee and Councilmember Berenkamp was made with Resolution 2026-02. So that was actually an unnecessary action. We already had a Personnel Committee. We just needed to activate the Personnel Committee. And so all of that discussion is a failure on my part to recognize that we already had the tool in place. If we had just used the tool the way that it was set up, I messed that up, so I apologize. We'd already had the appointment that would have handled that discussion.
Wasn't that I remember that exact thing happening, but I thought that was for 2025, which is why I didn't bring it up.
It's actually January 8th, 2026.
Okay, I thought it was
resolution.
2025, or I would have brought it
Yeah.
up. Okay.
Yeah, so I failed to recognize that in our effort to, there was a Personnel Committee appointment that occurred in our annual resolution of all appointments, and that would have been an appropriate way to handle it. I just missed it.
I thought we couldn't do committees, though. Isn't a committee, aren't we going to be back to that same discussion? If you have a committee with 2 staff members, you now have a committee.
So going back to what has been the historical practice of Corcoran,
Yes.
it's the wrong title in terms of how it's been, those personnel people who've
I'm
been
following
the
you.
discussions.
Yep.
The committee is the wrong title. I'm just pointing out that while it may have been the wrong title, it has been the standard practice for the city to have that on our annual appointments resolution since before I got here.
I don't think we've ever had a personnel committee. I don't recall us having a personnel committee.
So there was one assigned in 2023 that was part of my onboarding, and then that carried forward when we came forward with resolutions. There was a desire to continue it, so it was on 2024, it's on 2025, and then we had it again in
For
the
the last
resolution
3
for
years.
2026.
Okay.
Yep. Mayor, can I jump in on a couple of things?
Sure.
Yeah, so, a couple of things responsibly. As far as the committee goes, and I agree, but I think, we can say that that's not the preferred title for it, certainly, but we're still okay to allow, topically, subgroups of the council to need to do that. What we have to avoid is providing an empowerment where they make their own decisions. And they're given authority from the council. When that happens, then they should be meeting in an open meeting. You're correct about that. So it's what is it, not what is it called, is the more important part of it. As to the broader communications and the memo you were asking about, I understand that is going on a little bit more, and that's just fine. I think that remembering that one directional conversation isn't necessarily communication about an issue, right? So, but you have to be careful. There are pitfalls with that. So, while you may, for example, send out a memo to the rest of the council about, here's a policy I think we should adopt, something like that, right? Provided nobody responds to that until we reach an open meeting, there's no problem with that, right? Even though you've communicated your position on that to each of them. So circulating that, the recommended protocol for that is use the city administrator for that. Go through Jay. He would circulate it back, and probably with an instruction, hey, nobody responded until the meeting. Where you have to be a little careful is kind of the Councilmember Lanchman's point about, well, maybe we're talking about slightly different things but are kind of in the same area, right? So you put a memo about one policy, but then somebody else puts another one about it, but it necessarily kind of reveals your position on that, and maybe something that, in other words, are we having a conversation through memos, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we want to avoid. Same way you wouldn't want to do it through email, same way you don't want to do it as a group verbally, right? So the one direction communication is okay. You just have to be really careful that it isn't being responded to. So generally, when I run into this, I do follow the recommendation of, hey, let's work through the administrator, and the advice is just wait to respond, hold your comments until the meeting, you have the information. But if you each submitted a memo about a different topic ready for the meeting, that is acceptable, you can do that. As far as to Councilmember Lanchman's point about kind of the differentiation, you're right, and I did put in my memo, there is no bright line rule from this. There's not, I can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer for this. It's very factually specific. just the one kind of heads up I want to give you is, when in doubt, just consider holding off until the open meeting, only because that is sort of the way that courts have approached it. And they will impute intent to you, whether you actually intended it or not at times, right? So the main thing is, it's not meant to say you can't have a conversation with someone, but you can't one-on-one have a business discussion, to bounce some ideas off of somebody that's all similarly situated as far as their bank of knowledge related to what you're discussing. But what we don't want to do is add that third person to the mix that then makes it so that you have an understanding where a quorum of the council sits on an issue before you reach the meeting. And when that happens, I think issues that are close, we're talking about days of the week, but Monday and Tuesday are bleeding over to one another. I would say when in doubt, again, avoid that. But necessarily, the way the world works, I understand that, you talk about one issue. Well, arguably there's some argument that can be made that that's indirectly about the same thing. You just use your best judgment on that. And just with like I said, the fair warning that it'll be interpreted broadly. So if you have a clear line you could draw between two topics, and you keep that line clear with everyone you're talking to, I think you could protect it that way. I just would be very careful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the line between the days is midnight, so I'll.
And if there was that kind of a standard we could adhere to, I would happily give it to you. Unfortunately, these sort of things just never work that way.
Thanks, John.
With the busyness of schedules, one of the challenges that I found is trying to meet all of the different demands that different council members have. The practice that, from my last city in Shakopee, was council members actually provided the feedback to the city administrator by Monday morning, and then fed all of their questions out to staff. Now, he did not meet individually with all the council members. That wasn't his practice. I enjoy that practice in order to not only get to know you better, but also that helps me develop what we had in the military, as they call it, commander's intuition. So I understand where you're at and stuff, so that allows me to give guidance to staff better. That intuition helps us save a lot of time, because I've grown to understand what some of your concerns are, and so I have that information. But as a practice in Shakopee, then he fired it off to all the department heads. We responded to the questions, and then he did provide a memo responding. So we've kind of moved to that practice, like as Alicia's getting questions, none of you know who asked the question. She's simply saying, we received this question, responding to that question, here's the information. And that kind of avoids what John was saying, like you don't know different people's positions, you only know it came up and we're responding with the data connected to that. In order to provide that, that would change up our rhythm a little bit, because I'm meeting with some of you too late in the week for us to really put together and collect that data to provide it in a manner that would be helpful. And so I'd be open to that, but we'd have to change up our rhythm.
Might be lagging too. Might happen after the meeting rather than before. But.
Great.
Could we submit questions like Monday morning and then you still meet with us?
Absolutely.
That would work too?
Yeah, both would work. And what I think is what's helpful about that model, so there are some of you that send me questions often before we meet, and then that allows me to respond to the questions, which provides for more fruitful discussion when we meet.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So thinking back to past discussions, I feel that the reason we voted for the work session was because all of us wanted to have participation in the policy discussion. So as we move forward, I can see where it would be beneficial for example, if we're doing a fire study. Maybe we all don't need to have to be involved with a fire study, so that's such a big project versus a policy-specific thing. Is there some guidance that maybe we could, or maybe something that we could decide, this is how we want to, as a group, tackle whatever's in front of us, or is it really a case-by-case basis?
It seems episodic, because
Yeah.
there's so many nuances to each one. And I think by not putting too many constraints on it, that allows us to be nimble enough in order to respond to the emerging demands. my concern would be that, well, case in point, the discussion that we just had, if we'd gone forward with the practice that we had, we could then potentially flush some things out that we're bringing to a work session. Just like we've done with the fire services study, like we've done with the CBA, you know, with the bargaining agreement that we had. Two people did a lot of legwork, and then we brought it forward for a fruitful discussion. I think episodically is probably proven to be fruitful, unless you feel differently.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess my feeling on that is, I think if a council member wants to participate, he or she should be able to participate. You know, it was a good example. What about the fire study? I don't know how much time I would have to commit to something like that. So for me, I would probably say have at it. But with the compensation, topics and the longevity topics, I am very interested in being part of that. So I guess I do agree with you, but I also think that if it's a topic that has the attention of council members, if he or she wants to participate, I think they should be given that opportunity. Case in point was with the personnel committee, everyone here wanted to participate, so therefore I think everyone here should participate.
Can I ask a clarifying question to that, Councilman Leno? So practically speaking, and I think our labor attorneys would have opinions on this, the CBA would be an example. What if all 5 of you wanted to participate, and the sensitivity of those topics, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to have those discussions in an open forum, both from a strategic perspective and a tactical perspective. There's some significant reasons on why it would be appropriate for us to have open forum discussions on those. Do you have some suggestions if everybody wanted to participate?
Oh, I thought that there were exceptions to that, one of them being compensation negotiations, labor negotiations.
So going into a closed session
that
for
would,
those?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Fair enough.
If I may, yeah, that, I think we're confusing two sides of that issue. So what Jay is referencing is sort of the two-member team that are assigned to work on the contract and bring something back for the council to review. When that happens, that can be done at a closed session for the body of the council. The body of the council is not able to negotiate that inside of a closed session because it necessarily requires another party that you can't include in that meeting.
Okay.
So it doesn't quite fit that exception, but that would be for when the contract is finally reviewed, you do have that option.
Well, what's the downside of having it in an open meeting? We all love transparency. Why not be transparent with that?
With the labor negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the direction it's going in.
Yeah, I think you'd run into some sort of negotiation ineffectiveness by having it be held in an open meeting that way, having it, anyone and everyone is able to see every portion of it, what's bargained back and forth. I think the process is better preserved as a staff led with the assistance of council from a proposal stage into a draft final, if you will, as an example. And that it's not limited to just that either. I think at the beginning of the year, you come up with your annual appointments, right? You're going to assign, usually at the mayor's recommendation, and the council approves. These two are going to handle this. These two are going to handle that, and you go down the list, right? Inevitably, you'll have preferences where certain people will want to be on different ones or other ones, or et cetera. So they have to have a way to sort that out. And if we have more than 3, then we're going to do it this way. You are abandoning your ability to handle it outside of an open meeting. That is a loss in flexibility. You could do that. I think that the labor negotiations presents one area where that would be particularly challenging. But there are other considerations to it as well. For the personnel committee side of things, for example, oftentimes you're going to deal with data that is necessarily not public under data practices. So you have the issue of then having to have a discussion about highly sensitive and not public data at an open meeting. Whereas you wouldn't have to deal with that with a two-member subcommittee that could simply discuss it, bring back their recommendation, and then have the council decide without really getting into that at all or presenting it at any point. So I think there are some nuances to it, but the general practice has been and is for most cities to use that annual appointment process. That can certainly be adapted and changed as the year goes on. And to your point, if there comes up a new issue, we don't have an assigned committee for something, this is an issue that everyone has taken interest in, that may guide your way, and that would be another reason to do it kind of on a one-off basis. But I think abandoning all of the, subgroup assignments earlier in favor of just opening them up if more than two want to be on it will compromise your efficiency and productivity on certain things.
So we're back to an episode.
Episodic.
Yeah.
And tactically, it can be disadvantageous to have everybody present in certain conditions as well, because now you're giving the person you're negotiating against information on how everybody thinks about that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's only two people trying to convey the position of the group, you might have a little bit more leeway in what they can say or not say.
So how could we have a better balance of, once you called it a final draft, technically it wouldn't be a final draft if council hadn't had a discussion, or are we agreeing to let the two people decide?
They're not empowered to
Okay.
negotiate a
Okay.
final contract.
Okay.
That would be require it to be an open meeting. Yeah, that's what it would be is they bring you back a product that you will review and make a determination. Yeah.
Okay.
All those negotiations, when they're presented, so for the cities where I'm involved in this, there's always a disclosure. We will take it to the council. That's how that ends, right? So it's a proposed resolution or a proposed contract unless and until it's approved by the council, and that will always be the way it goes.
Okay.
Everybody will always have input to subcommittee recommendations. Up here.
Alrighty. And then we'll move on to 9B, which is Heritage Park Building Usage Survey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff has been working on developing a park building usage survey to ideally go out to the community to get some feedback on what they're anticipating for building usage, rental expectations, programming interests, and the operational preferences for the building. We also were hoping to, through our internal discussions, one idea was to gauge public interest in a potential volunteer role as a potential building attendant. But then, as further discussion amongst staff went out, we realized there was policy implications that we wanted to bring this forward to council first, so that anything that we show to the community aligns with your expectations as well. So we're looking for general direction on your expectations for building operations, rental frequency, and level of service. And then we're also hoping to get feedback on any policy implications of establishing a volunteer-based building and attendant program. So we did attach to the staff report the building survey, and we try to keep it real minimal with the questions. I'm not doing very well.
Staff broke it into different sections. So this first section is community use and interest, asking to please provide input on interest regarding renting the new park building, including preferred rental duration and general pricing expectations to help guide future policies and fees. And the first question is, how likely are you to rent the new park building for a private event? And it varies from very likely to not interested.
Do you want to put like a time frame on that, like once every 5 years?
So there's other questions?
Okay.
Yeah. What rental durations would you prefer? Full-day rental, half-day rental, no preference. What rental fee and damage deposit combination would you consider reasonable for using the park building? Half-day under $150 to under $200, half day for 150 to 300, or 200 to 350. Full day, 301 to 600, 351 to 500. Full day, 601 to 1,000, 351 to 500. Rental frequency desired. Please provide input on interest in how often the community expects to rent the building and preference for overall rental availability. Responses will help balance demand for access with the operational costs associated with staffing and maintenance. How often do you foresee renting the building within a calendar year? Weekly, monthly, seasonally, yearly, never? In your opinion, how many rental days per week is appropriate for the park building? One rental Monday through Thursday and one rental Friday through Sunday. One rental Monday through Thursday, 2 rentals Friday through Sunday. One rental Monday through Thursday, 3 rentals Friday through Sunday. 2 rentals Monday through Thursday, 2 rentals Friday through Sunday. 2 Monday through Thursday, 3 Friday through Sunday. 3 Monday through Thursday, 3 Friday through Sunday.
This one doesn't make sense to me.
So when we look at potential programming, do we want to have that available for internal programming through the week, or do we want it to be available for the public? And then there's the implications that we're talking about custodial services. If we're activating it every day that it's available, that's going to drive our costs for custodial services. And if there's any disruption, that also creates some staffing requirements and trying to resolve those disruptions, as opposed to if it's available one day, Monday through Thursday, then it's more available for internal activities. There's just, if it's available on the weekends, who's going to service it if there's any problems Monday through or Friday through Saturday that involves some overtime pay? The availability of the building is going to have policy and staffing implications.
I'm just not sure that asking any individual person for that is going to give you useful information.
Fair enough. That's why we're bringing this forward to council.
Who is this being sent to?
So we were going to make it available for anyone, so ideally geared to the public. It used to be geared to Corcoran public, so that is one of the questions clarifying our duties to Grove resident and Corcoran resident. And then we do have a list of interested parties who have been coming in asking about rental of the building, and we're sorry not to take down their contact information, so we plan to directly send it to them as well.
So is this being mailed like a
No,
hard copy?
no. This is going to be our usual survey route, so
Okay.
it's handled by staff internally, so we're not getting a third-party vendor. So this would just be something available online. If someone wanted a paper copy, they would have to call in and we could work with them through that.
Thank you.
I feel like a more simple version of this question might be, what days of the week would you want to use the building, and what portions of the day, like morning, afternoon, evening? And then you can consolidate that across all your anticipated users and figure out where the demand is. And then we can make a decision as to how much we want to open up for that versus programming. Yeah.
So not just one goal, but any of these.
Right.
Can I ask a question? It wasn't included in here, but I just think it's something that we should maybe think about. It's a really beautiful building, and I could see potentially people maybe wanting to be married in the building. And if they have a small enough wedding, they could do, a dinner inside and maybe do a little band outside. But then that brings to mind alcohol licensing. So right now in our parks, we don't allow alcohol.
We do.
Oh, we do?
Well, to a certain point, so it's like
Okay.
it's beer and wine essentially.
Okay, but we should think about that if we're gonna allow it, and in which spaces we would allow it to.
Yeah.
Because I would assume that would be something that people would want to have if it was a wedding on a
Probably
weekend,
some sort of special event permit.
or even a city event.
Yeah, I think there's ways around it. I know I got married at a city park in Egan, my first marriage. I don't want to talk about it too much, but the wedding was beautiful. But we were able to have beer and wine without any kind of additional liquor license, but we couldn't have a bartender. So it was like you could bring it, and it could be kind of like available in coolers, and it had to be non-glass.
What if they were licensed through the state to serve alcohol? Someone who was
So
able
we
to do
can
that?
create a policy, what we did in Shakopee. Huber Park is a wedding venue. We did it like that. And we only allowed people who wanted to do it to go through an approved vendor. So we had 2 different possibilities. One was a bar that was right across the street because it was close in proximity. And then the other one was someone who had an indoor space for an inclement weather plan. And they'd also do catering as an option. So we drove them, so there's only 2 approved vendors if you wanted to have something other than wine and beer. But we don't currently have a lot of options, so limiting it to 2 options seems very easy.
But yeah, we envision there'll be a rental contract where a lot of these details will be hashed out. So this is, we're just trying to get initial interest and figure out how to staff and budget for their specific
Yeah,
plans.
that'd be something good to look at longer term.
Something that's interesting, it came, you asked about what if the city wanted to do it. Not every city knows this, but we can pull our own liquor license. I did it in Shakopee, but there's some implications of it. So you have to have your tips training. You don't want to have volunteers or your own staff doing all that tips training in order to control it. So I pulled the liquor license, and then we had a third-party vendor come in that had another liquor license that was qualified to do that, and they fulfilled the service in order to manage that liability. But there's lots of creative ways to solve that problem.
Very good. Only other things I would add is, like we had in the big survey that we did for the building, is be like just to try to get some location data to try to feel where the interest is coming from for certain things, like what precinct are you in, what school district are you in? So we can kind of pinpoint, oh, okay, there's a lot of people that are interested.
So under demographics, adding some of those additional details.
Just to try to give it more of a, generally we know what part of the city, if we don't see any trends from where people are.
Would we be asking them how much of the space they would anticipate using, like half building, full building? It's, I believe, dividable, correct? We didn't get a divider? Okay.
Too expensive. And dividers seldom get used, and when they do get used, they get broken.
Okay. I
So
think get Timco to install it.
Actually, we could do it tonight. There's no way that we could do it after the fact. We want to do it.
So an important part that staff is looking for some guidance is section 3 was staffing and on-site support. So what level of on-site support would you prefer? Self-service facilities generally keep costs down, while staffed rentals can increase the cost. So staff available for emergencies only, maintenance and building emergencies, so the toilet's clogged or the electricity went off type thing. Staff available at the beginning and end of a rental, welcome to check-in and then do a checkout to make sure that they met all of their cleanup requirements. Staff present during the entire rental, that's pretty costly, or no staff needed at all. That's that first question. Any feedback on that question?
If I can ask real quick, do we have any documentation or information related to the community room that was here?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nothing
I don't
there.
know that a lot.
We haven't done a deep search for it, but it's been since 2019.
And I don't know that a lot was documented necessarily.
I've got some cool pictures.
No, I'm just saying, we had something, and that's what a lot of the residents are asking for, is you took away our community room. Is this our community room? And instead of asking, these are all great questions and all that stuff, I'd rather just set the time. It's available to rent here to here, these days to these days. I'd rather set it and then get the information back. The conversations about staffing it and such, as short as we are with space here and those kind of things, could some people office over there, I don't think it's set up for that. Could some people office over there to do some stuff and then it's open the same time as City Hall during the day?
That goes to someone's office, either at JCD or someone in there. If there's an issue, to call City Hall and go directly to that line.
So most usage is going to happen in hours when there's nobody here, unless we're intentional about having someone available. That's really what's driving the question. It's going to be after business hours usage, because
when we have the community room here, even if we don't have a lot of documentation, if anyone would know trends or what we saw when we had it.
Michelle might know.
I'll give you a little bit of
Michelle might know.
information.
So yeah, whenever Michelle knows, and then I was also thinking Brad, we wanted to reach out to Brad Martin and see if he remembers kind of any.
Michelle
I
can
was,
help us.
I was actually in charge of it.
Okay, great.
So I would say it was very limited. We didn't do a lot of rentals. Like, when I was overseeing it, we maybe did 6 a year.
That's kind of what I thought.
It was very limited. It was,
Pancakes, breakfast, lunch
the
time.
JCs would come in. There would be, the
Gun training.
gun
all
training.
those things.
We'd have the scholarship for,
Lions.
the Lions there. And then maybe 5 or 6 graduation parties. There was one family that routinely always booked for Christmas. They would come and do their Christmas there. So they were very sad when we never got to do them. But I don't know, from my perspective, I think it's important to try to create some sort of revenue. And if it means we have to have somebody that is checking in on the weekend, to me, that's valuable. Because I feel like we need to help that budget be a little bit more robust.
I think that we want to just be sure we're charging enough that it
Yeah.
more than pays for that.
Yeah, I'd rather not leave it unattended. I think,
New building.
Depending on the number of attendees, should we require a renter paid police officer to do that?
So in the past, from my experience with a couple different rental facilities, the only time that we required an on-site officer is if alcohol above and beyond what was allowed. So if they wanted to have alcohol there and they contracted, we required them to pay for an alcohol. Because outside of that, we had cameras, and so someone's paying attention to the cameras. If anything occurred, we were able to.
But are people monitoring the cameras live?
So we did not monitor the cameras live. 911 would respond. Usually what would happen with the cameras is if they didn't clean up or they damaged something, and then we'd come back with that because we didn't give them back their damage deposit. That's why we needed the cameras.
Have we figured that out for the new building, the camera system?
We just approved it.
Yeah.
We have a camera system.
It's like,
Oh, yes, we did, yes, we did. Verkana, I stand corrected, thank
We
you.
have a camera system.
Yeah.
So one of the dangers of having a full-time staffer there is we might price some of our residents out of using the public space that, because the overhead costs of covering the staff. Some things that we absolutely need is custodial services. And then there's gonna be some other potential just regular maintenance costs, changing the light bulbs, anything that's damaged, routine maintenance paint. In the winter, there's gonna be, we have to plow the parking lot and shovel the sidewalks, and there's some routine costs that we absolutely have to recoup. If you're thinking about revenue generation, adding additional staffing to that chips into that.
Can I add something while I'm thinking of it? Bug spraying? As that giant spider.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
That was Spider-Man.
If it bites you, you get great powers.
That's and great responsibility.
Yeah, no kidding.
Where did that go?
get your gavel.
Say that.
Oh, right there. You get it? I got it.
Did you actually?
I did. Right there. See, that's the circus.
We're gonna have spider rights protesters here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I need to add that to my job description.
That's one more point.
Go for the chips bowl. Okay.
Can I comment to City Administrator Tobin? I think that that's a valid point of like plowing, but I also see that as just part of a city service. Like, I don't think that should be included in the fee, if that's what you were referring to. Like,
No,
I feel like
I'm talking about how the revenues that we're generating.
Gotcha.
Because if we're not activating it, that's not gonna be a priority plow spot.
Mm-hmm.
If no one's gonna be renting it on a particular Saturday with all the other competing demands,
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna be the last place that they go to. But if we have it rented, then it needs to be a priority plow to make sure that they can get in there because there's a service expectation.
Gotcha. I mean, I think that's why we built the building, right, was for it to be used.
Absolutely.
So for us not to have a conversation now of not doing something because it's gonna involve us having to pay someone to do it.
No, it's not a matter of not doing it, it's a matter of how we do it.
Okay,
You know, so the question is,
okay,
for the staffing question that we're going out there, a full-time staffer is gonna generate a lot of fee if somebody has an all-day rental. You wanna pay somebody's, you know, I think our lowest, our part-timer is making $14 to $16, is it $16 for our, I don't know, yeah, something like, so $16 for 8 hours, is a lot to have somebody that they're actually only to be activating it for a couple
so we
hours.
have to decide, do we have someone let them in, have the event run, you meet at the end of the night or the end of the event, if it's a half day, whole day, whatever it might be, to retrieve the keys or whatever.
There's a lot of different processes. The event center that we had is actually called the Log Cabin in Shakopee. They came and they collected the key on Fridays before they went to get their rental for Saturday. So we had multiple keys that were out there. Somebody had a rental on Friday, somebody had a rental on Saturday. They go on Saturday, they use it, and then on Monday they come back, we look at the cameras. Somebody swung by and looked at the building. If it was clean, they get their deposit back when they turn the key in. If it wasn't clean, they don't get their deposit back.
Is that only one rental a weekend then?
So it depends on the weekends when we had multiple rentals. The community center was open, so we had somebody swing by to see it. But we don't have staff that's here on the weekend, but for something like this.
I think
And
that's
there is a question, number 8 there is, would volunteers be considered for this? And so, in theory, having volunteers assist us would be really great, but I think just about the example of how it's hard to maintain things, our beautiful garden in the back, if we had all the folks that, when it was started, talked about how they'd be here to maintain it, Public Works wouldn't be out there doing anything. And so that's a danger if you rely on volunteers.
Yeah.
If the volunteers don't show up, we still have an obligation to deliver the service.
I think that from an Airbnb perspective with my young family, like, it actually might even be available by phone call. Like, it might be like, I can't get the sound system to work, or like, instead of like a person sitting there 8 hours, is there someone that's paid on call to deal with it, versus, you know,
Right.
someone's on call for the plumbing issue, is someone on there for the customer service issue. Like, I'm having an issue with X, like, so when I get there, there's always the note, the keys are in the drawer, and then we can't find the keys to the pool. So we end up calling, and then we're good the rest of the night, and it's a call. So instead of 8 hours, you're paying as similar to our on-call policy, you're paying a fee, and then paying if they have to deal with something, and so it might be a more cost-effective way to have someone there. And just an idea from that perspective.
Similarly, it's
Yeah.
probably smart to make, like, kind of when you go to an Airbnb, you see like the laminated kind of tip sheets on how to work the sound system, how to do that. And a lot of that stuff I think we'll figure out as we open the facility and see how things go with.
And having run rentals for a little while, one of the things that we've talked about is you have to have it looked like this when you got here, here's a picture, it needs to look like this when you leave. So what do you want the setup to be? We definitely don't want to get into the business of doing custom setups for everybody.
No.
That's just, nobody's ever happy. You set it up the way they want and then they change their mind.
Yeah, back when I was doing it, we only had one customer that we kept their whole deposit, because the room was a mess. So it does happen.
Oh, yeah. I cleaned up after myself.
I think most people will. I think the concern from a staffing perspective is if you get a bad actor and you had a tight turnaround because you rented out both the morning and the afternoon, who's dealing with that? And so I think it is necessary to designate someone on call, and have limited staff in community development. So I work all weekend. I have jobs both on Saturday and Sunday. Seth works at Golden Valley on Sunday, so we're kind of running out of options as to who would be able to respond with our current capacity. So I think that was why the idea of a volunteer came up, but I think there are implications where that's not necessarily the golden ticket. So
Maybe the conversation could also bring up with Parks and Trails, could be a role that they'd be one that can be interested in.
A cleaning service could probably tackle it too, if you find a cleaning contractor, you can schedule, okay, I want you to be there from 12 to 1.
That will flush out too with the frequency. Like I tried to do morning and afternoon rentals, and it turned into kind of a nightmare, because if the morning rental was a bad actor, I like that phrase, it really messed up the afternoon actor. The only time that we did that was during graduation season. And then we actually posted a schedule. It was amazing how that was kind of self-governing, how they didn't want to screw their classmates over.
I think that that's a good idea, and should that be the person who sets up the sound system? I guess I'm just concerned about our renters being asked to, okay, here's a laminate with the instructions.
It's pretty
for
turnkey.
sound.
Yes,
Is it?
yes, so it's pretty turnkey.
Maybe my example is bad.
And if it's not turnkey, we need to make it as user-friendly as possible, because if they can get confused about it, they'll probably break it.
Yeah. It should be pretty simple. Okay, anything else for that? Nope, I think we're good. Nope.
So do we want to see if there's interest in the community for a potential volunteer role, or do we think that it would be better to have staffing or contracts?
I like Counselor Nichols' idea, because it could be, maybe we have someone in the community who wants to do yoga classes early in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or something.
So that would be different. So volunteering usage for the kind of space, but I guess we're talking about as a staffing perspective, to be the on-call person or the cleaning person, or.
Yeah, I think my suggestion was you find a contract cleaning service that you can schedule when you want them to come. And maybe some weeks there's nothing, maybe some weeks they're coming in 3 times at these random occasions. But is there a way to pool that resource somehow so that you're not manually trying to coordinate the hiring and firing and replacement of a low-wage person who may not stick around a real long time?
Who do we use for janitorial services?
So we have locals that do it, and they do a good job, but we probably best interest to do an RFP when it comes time to do it, so that we get multiple options, and we can include that within the scope of an RFP potentially.
I think it would be difficult to go beyond facility, like whether it's tech support or customer.
Yeah, the on-call part would still have to be some sort of person who's an employee that has the technical expertise but more often than not, if we set it up well and we don't make it too complicated, it's typically not an issue. Not everybody has trouble getting in the pool.
Okay, so I'm hearing remove the questions regarding volunteer interest, and we'll look at other strategies for that, and then,
Wasn't there a
Enhance
question?
the demographic question
Yep.
To understand better who the users are going to be.
Wasn't there a question too about, like, when would you like to use it? Wasn't that one of the
Yeah,
questions?
we have that, and then
Okay.
what's the frequency? For example, there's already been at least one group that reached out, and they want to use it every Friday. So, I'm
Nice.
hoping it's more than 6 times a year with how much work is done. So yeah, I do think we get at some of that. I think we did have at one of our earlier drafts, tried to have a question about like, what are you planning to use it for to kind of get better? Is it a yoga class? Is it a book club? Is it a wedding? We got rid of that question. We can certainly add it back in if you want, since we took out all the volunteer questions.
You could leave it open-ended.
Yeah.
I think it's good to leave it open-ended. Yeah.
We can add that back on.
You may find, based on that timing and day question, that you'll have prime time slots where there's lots of demand, and maybe the rental fee is higher.
And when we get that feedback, it could potentially drive some policy questions on what sort of things you want to happen in spaces. So for example, we made it a policy that we frequently at churches that wanted to have their Bible studies or things be it at the community center, and it was decided that as a policy perspective, those things were not going to happen at the community center because, at least in Shakopee, there were so many churches they had available to do that, and we didn't want to say yes to some and no to others, and so council made the decision to say not at all in the space, but we're a different community, and we can make a different decision.
That'll be something we figure out based on demand and actual usage and
council made a conscious decision that you couldn't do any political activities there. And so so that the city didn't have the appearance of supporting a particular party or candidate, they didn't allow anyone to use those sorts of things. That became super controversial.
How convenient that that supports the incumbents.
What?
How convenient that that supports the incumbents.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, a candidate could, someone running for council could.
They could have rented it, but they don't necessarily need to put in the same effort that somebody trying to break through does.
Names for Attorney General.
We don't want to lose them.
I don't think he wants that job. That sounds terrible. Hard pass.
Yeah. All right, we will incorporate your feedback, and then we hope to get this out in the coming weeks so that we can figure out next steps to get this building online as soon as possible.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, no unfinished business?
Nope.
What?
No,
Oh, you're just agreeing.
I'm agreeing.
Good.
No unfinished business.
Staff reports.
So I just had one thing that I wanted to share, Mayor and Council. Today, G Money and I sat down with Forum Fund staff and just looked at where we're at. And because I was asked how we're doing, I'm super happy to report that just since January 1st, in the last 4.5, 5 months, our current interest earnings in our 4M fund is $262,774 just for those 4.5 months. And so we're going to have some more data coming forward, but it's evident that when we changed the policy in May 2025, when you authorized that we're right at the 1-year mark, we now have a very diversified portfolio, and we moved from the bulk of our funds sitting in our farmer's bank account to now 4M has it working for us, and we're still maintaining a high level of liquidity. So we have what we need when we need it. We're doing that long-term financial planning, but $262,000 of just interest is super helpful.
Hopefully that has a positive impact when we go to budget next, when we have that history.
Shouldn't have a negative one. Property tax cut.
Because I thought I saw we had already 4x'd our annual estimate for interest income from the budget. So it's good to see. Hopefully next year we can be more realistic with it, and it would have a positive effect on the levy.
And that's going to change too. You got to remember that we bonded, so money came in. So that's a potential when we talk about, what we're going to get for our next bond for money. It's hard for us to predict what the market's going to do, but that interest income is very helpful. Not every city's doing that, so thank you for supporting us. And we're not aggressive, so we're not accepting risk. We're not going to lose money on it, but we're prudent.
Sounds good. Anything else with that?
Not for a staff report. No.
Okay. Council updates. I don't think I have too much or anything really, other than just upcoming schedule stuff. Next meeting, obviously, 28th. Now, no work session on the 28th, right, Jay?
That is correct.
Okay. And then have we had this conversation? Has everyone had the
That's the
conversation?
scheduled question that's next.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So yeah, other than schedule next, Civic Campus Open House is at Hope on the 2nd, 6 to 7:30. Yeah, and other than that, nothing happened. Anyone else?
I'd like to report that the invasive willow species are again destroying all of the trails that are recently patched.
Yes, I have a picture to show you, Kevin, and an area. I have an address somewhere. I'll show you after the meeting. Open area. I don't know if you're aware of it, but I was walking it, doing cleanup day in Ravinia, and it's popping through it's just tearing the trail up like it's cotton candy. It's crazy.
Super frustrating and not uncommon.
No, it's not. And I don't know what can be done about it, but just wanted to bring it to your attention just in case.
I have one thing to add too. I was just going to thank Public Works Director Matson, because I sent him a text this weekend on Mother's Day, because my daughter and I decided to do our highway cleanup. And we do from where I live all the way down to Heidi's and then all the way back. And we have some, I don't know what they're called. What are those things? I don't even know what they are. They were boxes that were knocked down or plowed over, and there was like exposed wires. One was a gas line. One was where the gas line was. The steel post was like completely plowed over. So I don't know if our farmers are getting too close to those. Are they utilities? I don't even know what those things are.
Yeah, it was a combination of utility kind of structure cabinets and post markers in your pictures.
So I did contact, I reached out to those places that you advised me to, and they said they would take care of it. So thank you for getting back to me. And then I was just going to add, we collected, and I don't know if there's anything we can do about this. My daughter had a suggestion. The little flags that go into the ditches to mark things, we picked up 157 of those in the mile down to Heidi's and the mile back. If there's anything we can do, can they put them on like little wooden posts or something, so at least they like compost into the dirt versus just having all of these stakes in the ground. And I know that someone's supposed to come through after that, whatever is done, but it never gets done. So we're gonna have all these flags all over our ditches because we have so much of that going on. Is there anything we can do about that?
I can work with Joe, and it's a goal for state one, but it's like a requirement of the state. So I'd have to do more research on that. We can review our options.
I'm just saying, we need to be cautious of when we're moving that ones we really should have a path. Thing that's
Yes.
there or not.
Right.
Depends how rusty they are.
They were very rusty.
Yeah.
They were very
Right.
rusty. Very rusty, yes.
They will rust away over time. It's a little plastic that will still be there.
Okay.
And with that, schedule thing?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so this is a question for council. As we were looking at the personnel policy discussion, we had it scheduled for the 28th, and then as soon as we scheduled that at the last meeting, Alicia reminded me that, by the way, I'm wearing my scuba tie tonight. It has sharks on it because I will not be here starting next Thursday. I'm going on my annual dive trip, so I won't be here on the 28th. And I think it was pretty important that I be here for that personnel discussion. And so then we asked to move it to the 11th, and you agreed to that. As we were talking about that with some of the guidance that we needed, we thought it would be very helpful to have our city attorney there, and he's not available on the 11th. And so when we looked at availability, a request would be, could we have a special council meeting on Wednesday, June 3rd from 5 to 6:30 that gives us adequate time to have that discussion, and ensuring that we have the right people in the room for that discussion. That's the request, Wednesday, June 3rd from 5 to 6:30, rather than a work session on Thursday, June 11th.
Could we just move the work session to the next meeting in June?
So the reason we didn't want to do that, our assistant city administrator who oversees HR, we anticipate that she'll still be here, but if anything should change, that would be an important discussion that she might miss, and we want to make sure that she's available to be there for that discussion too.
So 5 to 6:30?
That would be the request, if that's acceptable.
Could we do 5:30 to 6:30?
Could we do, so we were wanting to do a little bit longer than the hour, because I think that there's a lot there, and we want to give adequate time.
5:30 to 7? I can't get here at 5. I could get here by 5:30.
So that could be a pivot, 5:30 to 7, if that's acceptable.
Would work for me.
Is there anyone that would not work for? So that all 5 of you would be able to make it on Wednesday, June 3rd from 5:30 to 7. Thank you. Consequently, we will cancel the Wednesday, June 3rd work session, and then just a reminder, this is pretty important, June 12th.
Wait. You said cancel June 3rd work session?
Wednesday, June 3rd work session, 5:30 to 7.
Well, you just
Canceling
you said
June
cancel.
11th.
Canceling the June
Oh,
11th
okay.
work
I took it the
session.
same way.
Okay.
Okay.
But we still
Do
have
I need to
a council
officially
meeting
call
on
that
June 11th.
meeting? Do I call the meeting on the 3rd?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do it. You can
Meeting
set-
on the 3rd from 5:30 to 7. If there's any.
Thank you.
We still have 6:12.
Yeah, so June 12th, just a reminder, the campus visits that we're doing, we'll be going to first Chanhassen from 8 to 10, then New Hope from 10 to noon, and then coming back here to have lunch together and talk about what we've seen, and then have a discussion with BKB about what we've seen, what other discussion items related to the campus. So that's Friday, June 12th. That's all I had for schedule changes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, before you adjourn, I missed my window to talk to staff reports.
Go for it now.
Okay, I just wanted to alert you all, the Park Place Storage fourth edition, did get administratively approved, the way that the initial preliminary approvals were set up. They already had a site plan, so this was just kind of like, it was set up so that there was an administrative approval for a final site plan when they were ready to move forward. So they did meet all the conditions of the preliminary approval. They are moving forward pretty soon here. We're at the final stage where they're going to be signing a new SIPA and providing a new letter of credit. And on the bright side, phases 1 through 3 are in the process of being closed out. One of the final steps was reconciling their escrow account and their letter of credit, or the surety that they had on file, and that is in the process of being released. So, finished 1 through 3, and then they're working on their last phase now. So, deconstruction off of County Road 19, that is what's going on.
Cool.
Sounds good. Perfect. Anything else? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Deb can figure that out. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.